Fortnite OG is somewhat of a mixed bag for most people. While I think a lot of people had unrealistic expectations about what OG Fortnite was, or what this mode would be, it has definitely had its fair share of issues that are difficult to ignore. Ultimately, it begs the question of whether or not the OG mode was a mistake. Now, spoiler alert, I don't believe this Chapter 1 mode to be a mistake. Regardless of its problems, it has many strong aspects, and hyperfixating on the depleting nostalgia high would be doing a disservice to the core gameplay. But to better understand the objectively poor qualities this mode has, it's best to address each season at a time, as well as tackling the broad issues this mode presents. Fortnite's OG version of Season 1 struggled mainly because of what it does well, being Season 1. To be clear, faithfulness to the original Season 1 doesn't absolve the lack of shield, poor weapon balancing, or barren map as being valid criticisms of the mode. And while I do believe after experiencing it again, Season 1 isn't very good, I still believe this mode has very many strong aspects. The major thing I can credit to this mode is that it does feel like you are playing Chapter 1. Season 1 doesn't have any get out of jail free cards, or the proper term for those of you who don't play Reload or the Pit, item rotation. This takes away the endless stalemates that make modern modes extremely obnoxious, causing fights in OG to be more definite and punishing. Unfortunately, movement in Fortnite has been a huge part of the game ever since Chapter 3, starting with that one item that everyone glazes the chapter for. Epic has essentially cultivated a generation of players who can't function without item rotation. Naturally, without movement, it increases the difficulty of the mode, which isn't a good thing for the employed, but can be for those who don't want to play Running Simulator.
Kid, I think you'd be more comfortable over at that place.
Weenie Hut Juniors! Are you saying I belong at Weenie Hut Juniors?
Oh no, sorry. I was actually pointing to the place next to it.
Super Weenie Hut Juniors!
The weapons are mostly a one-to-one replica of the Season 1 loot pool.
Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you.
ARs have 2x headshot multipliers with no damage fall off, which makes them extremely effective at tap firing. Shotguns like the pump can once again one pump, with the max body shot at green doing 95, and a max headshot of 237. I made the point in my previous video about this mode that the shotguns are overall more balanced when they do lower body shot damage with higher headshot multipliers. While I don't believe the Season 1 pump to be the most balanced version of the weapon, it's definitely difficult to hit consistently high damage shots with. This is because most shotguns today prioritize high body shot damage with laughably low headshot multipliers. This results in casual friendly shotguns that don't require good crosshair placement to do significant amounts of damage with. Double pumping was viable during Season 1, primarily for wall retakes and early game fights that involve less building. The problem is outside of this, double pumping is just far too gimmicky and situational to be used in modern build fights. Getting in someone's box with a loadout will give you an easy kill, but that's where the situational factor comes in, as it's far more likely you will take a heavy amount of damage as a result. Again, in my opinion, the major thing that made it viable were wall retakes. This shotgun did 100 structure damage, meaning you can one-shot a freshly placed wall and two-shot a wood build. It's not easy to react to, and even if your opponent does respond with an edit play, you still have an extra pump to catch them off guard with, as most players aren't adjusted to the double pump exploit in modern build fights. Ultimately, I don't think this is meta dominating, because it does require a level of skill to understand how to use it, and there are a plethora of other playstyles that are just as, if not more viable than this dated exploit. While it doesn't impact the gameplay, it's important to mention that most of the old weapon models are utilized in this mode. Currently, Season 2 has two weapons, the TAC and the AR, that feature the incorrect weapon icons. The major reason I was pushing for these to be as accurate as possible is to allow these weapons to be alternatives to the existing ones in creative, with the older models being the distinction. However, during Season 1, there was one slight issue. Because the new snipers are technically in OG with the old ones, they have sniper glint and the old ones didn't, making the lower rarities better. A major issue with Season 1, as mentioned, is the lack of shield, and something that didn't help was the underdeveloped map. Despite the buffs, fights in this mode in anything other than solos result in the winning team having absolutely no additional healing items. And I'm not kidding when I say that splitting bandages was an extremely common necessity when playing squads. There honestly just isn't enough loot on the Season 1 map to sustain the resource requirement for modern day fights, and that, as well as many of the other issues this mode struggled with, drove many players away from it. Season 2 is a vast improvement to Season 1 and feels much more complete by comparison. Shield is not nearly as sparse, loot feels more common with the addition of 6 new POIs, and likely one of my favorite parts of the season, the balancing. The burst got an overhaul this season. Something I found rather disappointing about this mode was the burst not living up to the expectations I had for it. For whatever reason, this version of the burst AR has always been the most satisfying to me, but Season 1 had me doubting whether or not it was ever good. Season 2 improved the spread significantly and reduced the time it takes for the crosshair to reach first shot accuracy, accuracy. Honestly, for me, given its higher headshot damage and lower fall off when compared to the lower rarities of the assault rifle, most of the time I choose the burst. That's mainly my preference, but that's what makes the weapon work. I can actually choose which AR I want to run, instead of being forced to run the same weapon every time. Double pumping is pretty much useless in Season 2. Now that the pump does very little if any damage to structures, using 2 shotguns in rapid succession to take a wall isn't viable. Even back in the day, the double pump's power was really only accentuated by how little people built and how much people enjoyed using the exploits. Despite Season 2 and 4 having some pretty overpowered SMGs, they were mostly slept on because of how much more entertaining it was to double pump.
I feel about double shotty nerf, that shit's stupid. It's like, what's the point? Pump tac SMG has always been superior, so what's the point of nerfing double shotgun? You know, like, now there's no diversity in the game. Instead of gimping myself using double shotty, now I'm using what's good, you know?
The problem is now people cover themselves so effectively, it leaves no time for you to bother with a second pump shot, and it's just not worth running an extra shotgun for a strategy that didn't stand the test of time. Another improvement introduced with Season 2 are traps. I have never been the biggest fan of the damage trap, but it is nice to have a more frequent spawn rate for launch pads, and to be fair, it's nice to be able to punish that one psychopath who wants more than anything to be in your box. That's not to say they're balanced, because 150 damage is way too much for something that doesn't take that much skill, but it's nice that traps in general feel actually as if they are a part of the game again. Season 2 has had multiple weaponry additions so far, and one of them I really wasn't expecting. Epic added back the Zapatron. This was a Season 1 weapon that was only in the game for 30 minutes, but for whatever reason Epic didn't have it ready in time for the mode during Season 1, so they decided to re-add it for about a week during Season 2, and thank God it was only for a week. The Zapatron is essentially a hit scan pre-nerf heavy sniper rifle that has 4 shots in the mag. Everything about this weapon is stupid. It one-shots any structure without needing to be fully charged. When it is fully charged, it does 150 damage to the body and 375 to the head. It was likely one of the most common items for the week that it was in, and to make matters worse, it doesn't take a rare ammo type like it did back in the day with energy cells, but rather it uses sniper ammo. Genuinely, rest in piss. Look, I'm not going to go over every single weapon set to be added or every single weapon that has been, because that would be a waste of time, but I wanted to mention that it's like re-experiencing old versions of existing weapons because of how different the damage statistics were back in the day. All of these details make Season 2 a far more complete experience, and it's not surprising that since then many believe that the mode should have launched with this season. While I discussed many seasonal issues with the mode, I wanted to touch on some more broad topics that, in my opinion, hindered this mode substantially. Bots are undoubtedly the biggest issue with this mode. While it might not be obvious at first, Chapter 1 was not built for an overabundance of AIs. Modern Fortnite, as I mentioned before, is much more movement-friendly, which indirectly makes bots less of an issue. Chapter 6 Season 1 specifically has 2 different cars, 2 different motorcycles, and 5 different forms of item rotation that all make finding players take less time. Chapter 1 Season 2 has launch pads, and that's it. So most games you are walking around a dead map looking for any signs of life, only to be met by an android.
Wait, an android?
All right, ma'am.
Why aren't you sending a real person?
It takes at most 30 seconds to kill an AI. Sure, you might get a 20 bomb at the end, but 90% of your game was spent traversing an empty map in hopes that you might happen upon a fight. It is far more engaging to fight maybe 5 to 7 real players, because those fights will take a significantly larger portion of the match to complete. I know the counter to this is that OG allegedly has less AIs than the main BR, but I feel like the built-in MMR system for determining your skill doesn't work all that well. If I'm playing well, the following match will contain a noticeably more populated lobby, but if I lose even once, it's as if Epic feels sorry for me and floods my next game with bots to make me feel better about myself. I find it so childish that losing one game can make the difference between my next match being enjoyable, all because Epic views me as this pitiful shitter who needs to fight drones so I won't cry on Twitter about people trying too hard in a player versus player video game. Bots are atrocious. The easy and only solution is removing them if they want to retain the Chapter 1 gameplay. Honestly, despite the poor balancing and barren nature of Season 1, that first day or two where bots weren't in the game was some of the most fun I've had playing a Fortnite Battle Royale mode in years. And to those of you countering with just play ranked, I would like to direct you to Exhibit A.
What? not. It's just an ordinary crabby. Oh my goodness!
I referenced this earlier, but the OG mode isn't great for zero builds. I don't really play zero builds, but it's not surprising to me that it struggles. The primary issue is the map, and unfortunately that's just not something they can really fix. The best thing Epic can do is add more utility to the zero builds playlist. From my understanding, they have porta bunkers, you know, the circumcised porta fort, but that's it. While I have my issues with item rotation, from my experience with zero builds, it doesn't seem to function well without it. Season OG might have had a more developed map when compared to the Season 2 map we are on, but still, the Season 5 map was developed for a game far before zero builds existed. Regardless, Season OG didn't really struggle with the zero build issue as much because there was far more utility. To my surprise, the OG zero build mode still retains a decent player count, but as I mentioned before, it's important to be consistent with the original seasons only when it makes sense, and handicapping a mode in an effort to remain OG isn't a good reason. The final broad issue that in my opinion impacted the player counts is the season time length. Now I understand that hindsight is 2020, but 2 months for season 1 was a mistake, and definitely killed off some of the hype surrounding this mode. I mean, you don't have to take my word for it, the original season 1 was actually shorter than the OG modes version. Sure, the difference isn't substantial, but most players not only discovered Fortnite later on than the original season's launch date, but there was also no reasonable expectation for the current quantity of content we receive, considering the standard used to be much lower. As of currently, if they continue doing each season for about 2 months, which looks to be the case, it will take them about 20 months to complete the original 10 seasons, or almost 2 years. And honestly, I don't think that's a good idea. There's a heavy implication and a running theory that they will continue past Season X into say Chapter 1 Season 11. I just don't think people are going to be as interested in that type of concept if Chapter 1 takes just under 2 years to run through every season again. A big cause of disinterest for both the Chapter 1 and 2 maps was how long they stuck around. By the end, everyone was relieved to see the map get clapped by the Black Hole or the Cube Queen. I could definitely be wrong about this potential loss of interest, but I feel like the safer option would just be to conclude the original 10 seasons by the end of this year. As a whole, these 3 problems aren't difficult to rectify. Removing bots, adding more utility to zero builds, and lowering the time lengths of the OG seasons could easily fix these issues. To reiterate, I don't believe Fortnite OG's mode to have been a mistake. It's come to my attention that there's a lot of disappointment hinging off the idea that this OG experience doesn't feel the same anymore, and I wouldn't be doing my job here if I didn't address this strange criticism. I can't speak for everyone, but from my perspective, the OG mode was something I was looking forward to and now actively enjoy because of what it offers, and not due to some nostalgia blind straw man that everyone loves using. People have been somewhat shitting on the return of Tilted for a similar reason, and again, I primarily am excited for this type of content because I know it's of quality. While some may disagree, I view modern Fortnite as this kindergartner playlist where Epic holds your hand to the windscreen with whatever tools necessary, i.e. garbage and poorly balanced loopholes. Season 1 may be far from perfect when it comes to balancing, but at least the weapons require skill and the gameplay isn't overly convoluted with medallions, augmentations, and weapons that really shouldn't be in a shooter. It's simple, maybe a bit too bland, but far less headache-inducing for sure. It fits a specific player base, one that yes is much smaller now, but still one that Epic can capitalize off of. And if we're being honest, who's the nostalgia blind one here? The person who actively points out the details that make the playlist enjoyable and well catered to its target audience, or the insufferable moron who has this insatiable need for new content, spouting off about how it doesn't feel the same anymore. You don't have to like this mode, and that's the beauty of it. It acts as an alternative battle royale for those who don't enjoy the direction of modern Fortnite. I might not play the mode all the time, and it might not even be better than Reload, but at least Epic offers their own way to play Chapter 1 again, in a format that is infinitely more polished and accessible than any project available. Regardless, the OG mode will continue to be interesting as older seasons return. I wanted to apologize for being gone for so long. I had other videos in the works talking about Chapter 6's positive approach with the metaverse, but then they released Ballistic and a part of me died inside. I actually plan to talk about that gimmicky half-baked tactical shooter soon, but I was honestly more interested in talking about something that I actually enjoy playing. Also, to clarify, because I'm sure some of you are curious after my bitterness towards Fortnite's main BR, no, I don't think Chapter 6 Season 1 is bad. It's a pretty solid season that is easily one of the healthiest starts to a new chapter. Season 2, on the other hand, yikes. If you made it this far, consider subscribing or using creator code MUDGY if you want to support me. Anyways, thank you for watching and have a great day.